What I'm about to describe, what myself and Andrew has seen, has been happening for decades. It's not new. But I think one term that we heard consistently whilst we were there is that it's got much worse since October the 7th. So everything has been expedited, everything has been amplified. Indeed, just speaking to a colleague here before from Jerusalem, that every time she goes back, she notices a difference, but the rate of the differences has been expedited. It seems that the world's attention rightfully has been on Gaza for 18 months, the massacres, the destruction, the complete genocide of the people there. And in that, whilst that's been happening, it almost seems that an opportunity has been taken to amplify and expedite the situation in the West Bank. So that is something that I think is really, really important to point out, because it was mentioned to me by virtually everybody that we met. We witnessed firsthand a glimpse of what it must be like to be a Palestinian. It was relentless, it was humiliating. I felt the people were dehumanized. And unfortunately, a sentiment that I felt, that there was an erosion of hope. It was very difficult by the end of any hope of how the situation can be resolved. But I certainly feel that if the international community does not intervene in the situation in the West Bank, there's going to be a humanitarian catastrophe akin to what we saw in Gaza, what we are seeing in Gaza. And the repercussions of what is happening is going to be indiscriminate and disproportionate, and it's not only going to affect the Palestinians, the Israelis, the local region, but the global diaspora. The whole world is going to be affected. And I sincerely believe that if we do not intervene as soon as we can. So I just want to go through a few aspects of the trip. And first is the witnessing of the restriction of movement, the physical liberty of the Palestinian people. Now, we've all heard that Gaza is often called the world's largest open-air prison. But in the West Bank too, Palestinians are not just only imprisoned by their walls, that we have seen for now many decades, but we have seen the checkpoints increasing its frequency and its numbers. So a half-an-hour journey is now taking people 4 hours on average. But one really disturbing feature that we saw, which I think many said was a recent phenomenon, was whole towns being gated off indiscriminately without warning. So we ourselves witnessed one town as we were driving with an occupancy of over 40,000 people. There was a gate just across it, and people could not get on either side by any form of transport. So I just want to imagine that if that was my life or your life, and you had to get emergency medical supplies for a sick child or a sick family member, you drive down, there's a gate there. You don't know how long that gate's going to be there, you don't know when it's going to open. You can imagine as a child it takes so long to get to school anyway. With the advancement of this gate, it means you can't take your family car, you have to find public transport on the other side of the motorway. We met somebody who told us of an incident in that town where a whole wedding had to be cancelled because there was no way for the groom to go with the wedding guests. And this is every single day, the mental and the physical toll this much take on an individual. And I saw with my own eyes, and so did Andrew, the men standing on the other side of the gates, and their eyes, they were almost soulless, because this is a daily occurrence for them, this constant humiliation. And so you've got the gates, you've got these gates, you've got the walls, you've got these sophisticated routes and pathways, you've got this very difficult situation of working in certain areas, schooling in certain areas. It's apartheid in everything but name, and as confirmed by the ICJ as well. And as I say, I don't know what that must mean for the Palestinians' hope and future and mental and physical well-being. We're here, and I think Andrew's given them a good term about settlers. And I think Andrew said to myself, that sounds something very genteel when you say it. But we saw firsthand aggressive Israeli colonizers. And it was absolutely shocking to experience. And what was really alarming and what was or interesting is many of these Israeli colonizers or settlers not only worked with the protection of armed police, they seem to be working in collaboration with armed groups. And we saw that in Musafariyata in a land where we were witnessing settlers who were already armed, grazing their cows, and then sheep came along on a land that did not belong to them. So whilst we stopped to observe this, a police car came hurtling towards us, and I think there's some images of the police officers who came out pointing guns at us, hands on the trigger. And it was only after our local guide explained who we were that the guns were lowered, but the hands were still on the trigger. And this was done with such emboldenment, and apparently this is a daily occurrence. And indeed, about half an hour later, we went to another area, which must have been about 5 minutes away. There were two settlers, a father and a son, grazing their sheep, and the father made it very clear to me, indeed, that he was carrying a gun. And I think we've got the picture of that as well. And the gentleman whose land it was showing documentation in Arabic that this is my land. And this was all being done while the police were in the background, and completely allowing them to continue to do that. And it was just to see that your livelihood is being taken away with the state protection. And I remember what the police officer with the gun said to me: if they can prove it's their land, no problem, prove it to me. So that is a daily face. And then we were in Hebron, where we were being hosted by an individual who has himself, after the October 7th, was taken for 12 hours. He himself was tortured, sexually abused, and his house now is in the middle of neighbouring houses whose houses have already been taken over by settlers. So whilst we were sitting there, two Israeli colonizers, settlers came, and as Andrew said, look, you might as well give us this house, because we're going to take it anyway. And when asked why, the response was, because God has given it to us. When asked where would the Arabs go, he said, well, you've got the whole world, and for some reason he mentioned Italy. Maybe it was Italian, I'm not sure. And then on further questioning, what about the Arabs, he responded that he did not care about Arabs, and he hurled expletives towards the Prophet Muhammad as well. And then he just walked off, pointing the finger. He had a t-shirt with the Star of David, and on the Star of David was the middle finger as well, and he combined it together. And again, this was not just bravado, there was two soldiers standing there with pointing guns at the rooftops. And as I said, the house itself, the neighbour's house, has already been half annexed, and the house next to it has been completely taken over. So it was just going to be a matter of time before his house is going to be taken. And so we saw this firsthand, and until you do not have that immersive experience, words cannot really express that emotion that you feel. Thirdly was the grounds of religious intimidation. All of you here must be aware that Al-Aqsa is the third holiest site in the Islamic world. And I as a Muslim, I went there 4 times in my trip whilst I was there. Every single time, bar one, there were always more Israelis settlers than there were Arabs in the compound. We saw at one stage the dancing and the singing at the Lion's Gate in the Al-Aqsa Square, which is a quite famous gate for access into Masjid Al-Aqsa and has historical context. And the singing and the dancing, we were told, were of words celebrating the imminent building of the temple in the site of Masjid Al-Aqsa. And this was done completely openly and blatantly. And subsequently, whilst we were walking in, over, I think it must have been at least a couple of hundred settlers with armed guards, and some of the settlers themselves were carrying guns, walked around the compound of Masjid Al-Aqsa. And it wasn't as tourist, it wasn't as curious individual, it wasn't even as worship. It felt intimidatory, and it felt very, very aggressive. What was really also quite, maybe for my naivety, and I seek forgiveness for that, it was Easter Sunday, and I couldn't believe the amount of, the level of animosity towards the Christian community. So it was Good Friday, and the Christian community, I saw a whole group of them outside who were not allowed to enter the church and the holy compound in the square. whilst because there was allowing the Israelis to come in at the same time. And we also heard spitting actions towards many Christians walking by as well. It was absolutely shocking to see. I myself was not allowed to enter the Wailing Wall. My colleagues were let through, and the simple reason was he asked me my faith, and I said I was a Muslim. So he said, you're not allowed to come. So I was not allowed to. I don't know if that's a rule or they made an exception for me. I'm not quite sure. Finally, we saw another part of the area. We travelled to Israel, to Tel Aviv, and we travelled to Haifa. And the contrast was remarkable. Just an hour away, there were beaches, there were cafes, there was music, we could have been in the Mediterranean, and there was this real sense of calm. And you could forget that just a few miles away there were checkpoints, there was an apartheid wall, and less than an hour away there were bombs dropping into Gaza. It was just a completely surreal experience. Unfortunately, it was there where we met an Arab Israeli who was a member of the council there. He was an official who gave me probably the most depressing aspect, despite of everything that I see. Because I always look for hope, and I look for hope in the young, and I look for hope in the future. His role was to humanize the Palestinian people. So he spoke to school children on a regular basis, Israeli school children. And he described to me a group of 9 to 10-year-olds when he explained to them that Palestinians have children just like you are children. And they have hopes and they have ambitions and they are just like you. And he expressed to me and to Andrew that that was the most difficult concept for the Israeli children. And these were the terms that he used. He goes, but baby Muhammad will grow up to be adult Muhammad. And adult Muhammad will kill Israelis. So therefore we must kill baby Muhammad. And that left a really, an emptiness inside me at that moment. So that's the depth of dehumanizing that we're witnessing. And I sincerely believe, and I was so glad I was with Andrew because he's an eternal optimist, but I sincerely believe that we are 1 minute to midnight. At this moment, if the international community doesn't act decisively and urgently and with principle, what is happening in Palestine, what is happening is not just going to be a tragedy in Palestine, but it's going to be a stain on our collective conscience. And if it's left unaddressed, it will, as I said initially, it's going to have consequence not for the region, but for the globe. So therefore, we must uphold the ICJ ruling that Israel policies constitute racial segregation and apartheid and respond accordingly. So if somebody is being illegal, how do we respond and how have we responded historically? We must, however it looks like, I think the Palestinians have the right to see how they wish to live, but what we must do is support the Palestinians' right to self-determination. And then we can talk about 1 state or 2 states or whatever, but we must recognize the Palestinians' right to self-determination. And we must do what we have done historically as a nation. Israel is our friend, but we must save sometimes our friends from disaster. And we must impose targeted economic, military and diplomatic sanctions until all international law is respected. We have to be consistent. I'm not taking sides. I want to make this really, really clear. This is about standing on the right side of humanity and on the side of truth, on the side of justice and on the side of peace. Because a future where Palestinians are free, equal and live in dignity is definitely a society that is not a threat to Israel's security, whereas the other society is a threat to Israel's security. And I feel it is the only path for a long-lasting security for both peoples. It's in everyone's interest, Palestinian, Israelis and the Gold Group community, that we do not allow apartheid and impunity to continue. And I believe that the time to act is not tomorrow. We haven't got time. We've got to act today. We've got to act now, before more lives are lost, before more futures are stolen, and before, unfortunately, that final minute passes.